Okay, we are live. Let's go.
Awesome. Love to be live with you guys. Welcome to the Pistons Talk Podcast on YouTube. I'm your host, Lance Caparosi. Follow me on Twitter at Lance Caparosi. Follow my co-host, Anthony, at Pistons Talk across all social media platforms if you haven't already. Anthony started the brand. I hitched my wagon to it. All right, let's get this started. Monty Williams, he's fired from the Phoenix Suns. Interesting move. And I have never been happier for someone losing their job than Monty Williams did last night. Like, because the possibility of signing him feels so real, just because of the connection to Troy Weaver that Sam Vecini pointed out last night. I don't know about you, but I believe Monty Williams gets an interview with the Detroit Pistons. I don't know if they've made their mind up yet on a coach, but I have to imagine when a big fish like Monty Williams becomes available, and he's going to be wanted by several teams. So I would have to imagine the Pistons are one of them, and I couldn't be more excited. But what about you when the news broke, Anthony? How did you feel about it?
I had read an ESPN article from Tim McMahon, and he kind of hinted that it could be a possibility. And like when I read it, I was like, man, there's no way. Like, he's one of the best coaches in the NBA, but I was very surprised when that did happen. But we've been. I shouldn't classify with all Pistons fans saying that we've been waiting for us to hire a coach. Like, we thought we were going to have a coach by now.
Yeah.
There's been kind of like a discourse among fans that, we're waiting to see which playoff coaches may get fired. And you got Mike Budenholzer, Monty Williams. I mean, you could throw Nick Nurse in there, even though they didn't make the playoffs. I mean, there's so many playoff and championship caliber coaches this spring, summer. I can't remember the last time I've seen so many high caliber coaches that got fired. Like, Doc Rivers might get fired today. Like, that's insane to me. Like, you got Budenholzer, you got Nick Nurse, Monty Williams, possibly Doc Rivers. Like, absolutely insane to me. But I think, hey man, maybe the Pistons can get one of those guys.
I'm hoping for Monty. Like, I'm good on Doc Rivers. I'm good on Mike Budenholzer. Nick Nurse, I mean, we talked about him before, but like for Monty Williams, though, this is the thing that kind of surprised me because I tweeted some of this stuff out last night, and there was a Pistons fans that tweeted at me that basically just said he wouldn't want to retread, basically like retry with a coach that hasn't proved to win anything. Monty Williams was a 2-time coach of the year. He got them to the NBA Finals a couple of seasons ago, which was great. He can win in this league. He established a winning culture in Phoenix. And the biggest gripe for a lot of fans, too, is that he didn't win with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. I don't know how many games those guys played together this season, but it wasn't enough. And I don't know about Monty Williams' adjustments or any of that stuff, like on the floor. I mean, I feel like, yeah, some coaches are stuck in their ways, but he has won. Like, I mean, this would be the best coach that the Pistons have fired in probably the last 15 years, it feels like. I mean, it might be a little debatable because some guys still love Stan Van Gundy. I believe in those last 15 years, Flip Saunders would have been in there too somewhere. But, basically the last few years, it has kind of sucked in Detroit. We all know this. So bringing in a guy that can establish a winning culture, that would be huge. I think bringing in Monty Williams, that would accelerate the rebuild, in my opinion. But what about you? Do you think bringing in Monty Williams would accelerate the rebuild?
I do, because I think as a coach that when you kind of look at what Troy Weaver said at the end of the season press conference that he did have, that he said he was looking for a coach that could be disciplined, develop, and was defensive minded. I think Monty Williams checks all those boxes. I also think if you're looking to get to a point where, okay, you had 17 wins, you had 20, you had 23, 24, whatever. He's a guy that where, his first year in Phoenix, I believe he was at 33, 34, and they were a 19-win team. So, I mean, every year he had improvement. Obviously this year, the Suns had injuries. Booker was injured, most of the year, just like nagging injuries. But like you said, 2-time coach of the year, a guy that is very well respected around the NBA. And oh yeah, he comes from the Greg Popovich coaching tree. Okay. Greg Popovich coaches are fairly good. I mean, Budenholzer was under the pop tree. So is Monty Williams. I think if you're the Pistons, I would be so aggressive with this. I would be interviewing him right now because I don't want the Bucks and I don't want the Toronto Raptors to kind of swoop in and steal him. Um, I feel like there are a lot of coaches out there. There's a lot of high caliber coaches out there to hire. But to me, I think if I'm a Piston fan, I would want Monty Williams more than any other available coach that is out there right now, just because he's proven that he can take a team that is at the bottom and kind of get them to the top. And I think as a Piston fan, that's all we want. We want to win more than 17 games. This going into next season, we want to try to flirt with that play. And I feel like if you were to hire Monty Williams, he could be the guy that get you maybe to 35, 40 wins next season, with a top 5 draft pick, with $28 million in cap space, with, a young core of Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, and Cade Cunningham. Like, to me, you got to go for it, man. You got to swing for the fences, in my opinion.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. And now that he's available, and again, I don't even know if the Pistons are going to interview him. I'm just assuming they're going to interview him because this is one of Troy Weaver's guys. Like there is a connection, between these two guys. You said development, and man, Devin Booker got better under Monty Williams, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Cameron Payne looks like a serviceable backup point guard now, and he has been for a couple of years under Monty Williams. So I think, I know there was like some issues surrounding him and DeAndre Ayton and their relationship, but from what I read, it seems like he's really loved by a lot of his players, current and former. So I just think it's more of a outlier with DeAndre Ayton, just a little bit, and I think it's just because I don't know, I don't know much about DeAndre Ayton's personal life, but the things that I've read recently where it was like, he stays up late and plays video games, it kind of seems like basketball isn't always the first thing on his mind. And, we're all human beings. I get it. But it seemed like it was more of a coach just going to connect with the player because the player didn't want the best out of himself versus what the coach wanted out of him. I don't know. That's how I read it. But yeah, I think Monty Williams, if you were able to bring him in, it would be just incredible right off the get-go. I think you really do. As long as the team is healthy, they have a chance with a veteran, experienced coach like Monty Williams. And one thing we're not even touching on is his relationship with other players. We've been talking about Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson played under Monty Williams. You bring him in, there's probably a better chance of bringing Cam Johnson along with him, or someone like Kelly Oubre, who had a career season under Monty Williams when he played in Phoenix. Like, that's the possibility, and that's the angle we haven't even touched on yet. But I don't know about you. Maybe you did say it, but Monty Williams, he would be I know we talked about Jaron Collins and Charles Lee and Kevin Ali last week, but Monty Williams, I think, would have to be pushed up to number 1 in my opinion.
Yeah.
Candidates.
100%. I did want to touch on something you said with DeAndre Ayton. Because, there are some fans out there saying, why would we go after Monty Williams? He doesn't know how to develop centers, right?
Yeah.
I think the DeAndre Ayton thing, I wouldn't really say it's solely on Monty Williams. I just think DeAndre Ayton is such a talented player that he's just kind of wasting his talent. I mean, we've all seen the videos of him standing under the basket. Yep. Jalen Duren isn't standing under the basket. James Wiseman is not standing under the basket. Isaiah Stewart wouldn't do that either. Not even Marvin Bagley. I think Monty Williams would love working with bigs, the bigs that we have, because I feel Jalen Duren, to me, I think Monty Williams could get the best out of him with the DeAndre Ayton stuff and how he benched him last year and stuff like that, not giving Chris Paul a high five, going into the huddle. I think it's more of a DeAndre Ayton thing than a Monty Williams thing. So I kind of wanted to get that out there because there are some fans saying, like, hey, he can't even develop Ayton. What's he going to do here? I think it's more of Ayton. Maybe he just, I don't know, maybe he's lazy, in my opinion. Like, why are you standing under the basket and your team's trying to get a rebound and you're just watching Jokic, score 2 points and you're standing there for 5 seconds. But yeah, just wanted to touch on that.
No, and I mean, DeAndre Ayton could be content. Like, I mean, he just got paid. He was I believe, a 20-10 guy in the NBA, at least during one season of his so far in the NBA, or close to a 20-10 guy. But yeah, I just think he's a guy that has gotten away with the talent that he has, and probably in his mind, it's like, what do I need to improve upon? Look where I rank amongst the centers when you look at my stats. I look like I'm one of the best. So, yeah, I think Monty Williams would love coaching a center like Jalen Duren, who has a high motor, and a guy like Isaiah Stewart, who has improved every year he's been in the league, and now he's looking like a pretty consistent outside shooter until the shoulder injury. So, yeah, why wouldn't, I'm not worried about Monty Williams coming in and Jalen Duren not reaching his potential, because that's part of the coach's job to help him get there, but it's also a lot on the players. So blaming Monty Williams for DeAndre Ayton's deficiencies at the center position, that really should just go out the window, because it only can be on the coach so much. Like, the coach can only do so much for the player and put him in a position. Eventually it becomes on how badly does the player want to be great and how good do they possibly, it falls on their own shoulders. So I don't blame Monty Williams for that stuff, but yeah, like I said already, I would love the hire in Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, he's the best available coach right now. I'd assume that he at least gets a phone call at the very least. Uh, Honestly, man, like when he became available, I was just like, oh, okay, maybe this is what we were waiting for. Maybe this is the guy that they were hoping may become the coach. I mean, Phoenix is prying around Tyronn Lue, and he's still coaching the Clippers. Like, yeah, we want Ty Lue. It's just like they're a whole nother dumpster fire right now under Matt Ishbia ever since he did take over the team. I mean, the more we hear from Woj and everything that's going on in Phoenix right now, like, it's absolutely insane. If you're a Phoenix Suns fan, I would be very scared, because you may be rebuilding in the next 3 to 4 years.
Dude, I'm kind of surprised. Like, there's some weird, I was reading some stuff about Matt Ishbia too, because he basically took over as he took over as basketball operator, basically taking James Jones' job away from him, and basically just making him like a figurehead, just delivering bad news. But Matt Ishbia, what I love about him is he's just like, dude, I was able to build a winner in 2K. I'm going to do it in real life, which I think is so much. That's what it feels like, though, because he feels like a very impatient 2K player, where it's like, I got this team, and you can force trades. You can quickly build your team through 2K. I just think he's kind of an impatient owner, even though he still hasn't even owned the team, I think, for a year yet.
Yeah.
But impatient, and it is going to be a roller coaster ride for the Phoenix Suns fans for the next couple of seasons. Because I heard also he really values draft capital, but he traded so much away for Kevin Durant. So that kind of gets me thinking, who's going to be on the trading block? Like, who is he going to get rid of? Who becomes available? That's going to be so interesting over the next couple of months in Phoenix. I'm sorry, Phoenix fans, but like I said, roller coaster ride is coming for you guys. Whether you want to be on the ride or not, you are in for it. And it's just going to be amazing to watch over here in Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw an owner just kind of take charge. Apparently, he facilitated the whole Kevin Durant trade. People in the Phoenix front office didn't want to give up Mikal Bridges. He's like, screw it, let's do it.
Yep.
Which I get it. You want to go all in for a championship, but the fact that you fired 2 of your top scouts, you fired assistant GMs, you basically didn't inform Monty Williams that he would be fired. You didn't even tell him. You just did it. Like, hey man, if he's hired by the Pistons, it's our gain and their loss.
Yep.
I like with them, it's just like I don't even know what they're trying to do, and I think owners should be involved in some decisions, but they shouldn't go in there and basically be a president of basketball operations while your GM is just a glorified secretary. It sounds like.
That is, he's just updating his resume right now. That's what I used to say about Tom Gores too. I remember on a different podcast, I would tell people, if you're an owner of a team, you have the final say in what goes on. You can force your hand at any moment, at any time. So I used to say, if Tom Gores sees a player that he likes, like like what they did with Blake Griffin. I can't imagine that was just all Stan Van Gundy. I think
Mm-hmm.
Tom Gores definitely had his hand in there where he's like, look at this superstar. He just became available. Let's bring him in. And it just messes with things. I think owners, like you were saying, to a degree, they should have a say, but also they should let the basketball minds work and operate to build the best contender they possibly can for your franchise. But we'll see what happens in Phoenix. It's going to be like I said, it's going to be a fun ride. It's going to be awesome.
For sure, for sure. Fact that we almost have 100 people in here and we've been on for 15 minutes is amazing. Shout out to you guys. So if you guys are listening live on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button. It helps out the channel a lot. But I know you want to talk about Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren on this all rookie team because I know you're gonna go off on this topic, and I know it's something that I told you don't be surprised if it does happen. And hey, I was right. They're on the second team.
Yeah, you were right about that. And I mean, I don't remember what I said exactly, but I knew, yeah, it felt like once I saw those rookie of the year voting when he came in sixth, you knew he wasn't making first team. Like it was just right there. And yeah, Jaden Ivey made all NBA second team along with his teammate Jalen Duren. He was snubbed from the first team. And it's honestly bullshit. And it's a disservice to Jaden Ivey because like we've touched on so many times on this podcast, his development, his improvement from the first game to the final game, he was a completely different player. Mm-hmm. He was doing things by the end of the season that we didn't think we would see for at least another season. You know, like the spot up shooting, the playmaking, those were huge for Jaden Ivey. He grew so much as a player. And again, I think it's bullshit that these awards are voted on in the first month of the season. You know, Benedict Mathurin, yeah, he had a great start, but he tapered off. And I'm not just saying that as a Pistons fan, that there were Pacers fans saying that about Benedict Mathurin. So why you hold a bad start against Jaden Ivey and don't hold a bad finish against Benedict Mathurin or any other rookie, it's just a slap in the face, not only to Jaden Ivey, but Detroit fans and basketball fans. I mean, Jaden Ivey got robbed. That's really what it was. And I mean, I shouldn't be this disappointed and this hurt by it, but I am because, you know, in Detroit, we very rarely get to root for rookies like this. And we want to see them shine and be honored the way they should be. And yeah, the NBA voters, they missed it, man. They really did. And I know I sound like a broken record, but man, NBA voters, man, you guys, you really did a disservice to Jaden Ivey, and it's a shame, man. It really is.
Yeah, I would say Jalen Duren. I want to start off. I think he had a good season, but I think we can both agree Walker Kessler deserved that first NBA first team, whatever, our rookie team. He just had a phenomenal season with Utah. But I still think Jalen Duren is one of the better centers from his draft class. And I think he's a starting caliber center on basically any team in the NBA. There's just so much there with him that kind of, as a Piston fan, you're just kind of just like salivating, like, man, we got a franchise center at 13. Like, not too many teams can say that, you know, getting someone that late in the lottery. So I'm still happy with Jalen Duren, happy that he did make the second team. With Jaden Ivey, to your point, I think you can make an argument with him and Benedict Mathurin. Now, I've told you it's all politics in the NBA, especially with the voting. They value team success and wins over if you make first team, if you win Rookie of the Year, if you MVP. It just gets to the point where it's like these voters kind of are box score watchers, in my personal opinion. They're not really watching the games, and to be fair, they probably can't watch all 31 teams. I forget 32 teams. I forget how many teams are in the NBA. I can't keep up. But I think Jaden Ivey and Benedict Mathurin, I mean, I made a stat graphic. I mean, Benedict Mathurin and Jaden Ivey are very comparable. Like, Jaden Ivey was labeled as a non-3-point shooter, and he shot a higher percentage from three than Benedict Mathurin. Now, obviously, Mathurin came off the bench and put up those stats in less minutes than Ivey, but Ivey was going up against ones when Mathurin was going up against twos and threes. in my
Yep.
personal opinion. Like Ivy was going up against, the top point guards, top shooting guards in the league, while Matherin is going up against bench players and, fringe NBA guys. That's just my thing. And to your point, yeah, Jaden Ivey from October wasn't the same player as Jaden Ivey February, March, April. Completely different player. So that's why I feel he did get snubbed. That's why I feel he should have been on the first team, because to me, I think he was one of the better rookies out of this draft class this year. And I still believe he's going to be a multi-time All-Star throughout his career. I think he could possibly win an MVP. That's just how highly I think of him, because there's so much there with his game where the fact that he developed that fast in one season, give him, by year 5, year 6, he's probably averaging 25 a game. He's probably in dunk contests. He's probably, at All-Star weekend, just dominating. With him, you got, I've said it, you have a superstar in Jaden Ivey. I know a lot of Pistons fans are like, you're just drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm not just drinking the Kool-Aid. I've never seen a Pistons rookie over probably the last 10 years develop that damn fast. And that's why I was kind of pissed off when I saw that list. I was just like, come on, man. Are you kidding me? Like, this guy's box office, man. Like, there's a reason why you see Stephen A. Smith pissed off that the Knicks didn't get Jaden Ivey. He knows. Everyone in the NBA knew, going into last year, Jaden Ivey had those comps to Russell Westbrook, had those comps to John Morant. Like, there's just stuff in his game where, as a Piston fan, you should be so proud and so excited for the future.
I have a feeling, like, you compared him to Dwayne Wade a couple episodes ago. I have a feeling with Jaden Ivey and like you just touched on, the way he improved was so fast that I think he's gonna have a second year similar, like a jump from rookie year to second year, just like Dwayne Wade. Dwayne went from 16 to 24 points per game, 4 to 5 rebounds, 4 to 7 assists per game. I could see a jump like that coming from Jaden Ivey because he's a relentless worker and he is a true artist when it comes to his craft. Like, he just wants to get better. He wants to be great. And yeah, I just think we're going to see a huge jump from him. And I think getting snubbed from the all rookie first team, even as fans, we're not supposed to take this personally, but I know players do. That's going to be a chip on his shoulder. And he's going to want to prove to everybody that he is the guard to come out of this draft. I feel that about him. And just the way he plays, it's just, we got a good one in Detroit. And even though I'm upset and I'm pissed off about him getting snubbed, I'm so excited for the future of this kid and this team. Like, we got a good one. So
something I did want to touch on. So I've watched, players, go through warm-ups. I shit you not, Jaden Ivey's preparation for a game, dude, he's out there a good hour prepping for stuff, like whether it's working on 3-point shots, working, coming off picks. Like, his preparation before each game is something where he takes it seriously. He takes his craft very seriously. So I'm not surprised that he developed that fast because he puts in the work. And like I said, we need players like that. We need 12 players that are willing to put in the work, and he does. And like you said, I'm still proud that the Pistons did draft him at 5. I think we're very fortunate to draft him at 5. But, he did get snubbed in my opinion. But, hey, he can probably use it as motivation when he's an all-star next year.
Yep. Dwayne Wade was in his second year. We'll see. That would just be so crazy. And if you add Monty Williams to the mix, a better coach, more experience, putting his guys in a different position, maybe we do get to see him make the All-Star game next year. Who knows? We got another second piece of news, though. A lot of fans are going to love this, man. Ben Wallace will represent the Detroit Pistons at the NBA Draft Lottery. Last time Ben Wallace was at the NBA Draft Lottery, the Pistons won the first pick. We drafted Cade Cunningham. Will the magic happen again? I don't know. I do not know. What I do know is that if the Pistons win the first pick again, Ben Wallace will not be catapulted to the top of the GOAT Pistons discussion. That was the whole reason I brought this topic up. Like, it is good news, and I don't know. Maybe the magic will happen again. Who knows? But the funniest thing that I heard from this was if the Pistons get a second first pick when Ben Wallace represents them, he will be the GOAT Pistons player of all time. I'm not buying into that. I love Ben Wallace. He's my all-time favorite Pistons player. But that title belongs to Isaiah Thomas,
Yeah.
only him. Because when you're talking about the GOAT player, it happens on the court. Just because Ben Wallace represents the Pistons at the draft lottery, it does not affect his, his title as the GOAT or whatever you want to call him. I love Ben Wallace. He's one of the greatest Pistons ever. He's on the Mount Rushmore of the Detroit Pistons, but he's not the GOAT. And he won't be the GOAT just because they get if they win the first pick again. That has no influence on it, though. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, Pistons fans are kind of crazy, though, even making me talk about this.
Yeah, like when I saw it in the prep, I was just like, Ben Wallace to go. Yeah, like he's one of my favorite players growing up. Love that we traded for him.
Yep.
I love the fact that they're sending him back to the draft lottery.
Same.
If the Pistons were to win the lottery again, I think you have to have that conversation. Is Ben Wallace shaking down Mark Tatum before each draft lottery to make sure the Pistons get that first pick card? That's the only thing I would probably say with it. But hey, man, maybe he's good luck. We're gonna have to wait and see. I believe this Tuesday it is, Monday or Tuesday. I don't know when the draft lottery is. I believe it's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday.
But like I said, it's a really silly topic. Will this catapult Ben Wallace at the GOAT status? I don't know. It sounds like a really like Pistons Twitter little 14-year-old kid came up with this. Honestly, like.
But do you feel better about the Pistons' chance of getting the number 1 overall pick with Ben Wallace representing them?
I don't, feel better or worse with it. I'm happy that he's there. Anytime he's on TV, I love seeing it because he's one of my favorite, player growing up as a kid. So I love the fact that he's going to be there, and I love the fact that he still has a good relationship with the Pistons. But I mean, it doesn't really like change my opinion if he's there or not. But hey, man, like maybe he's good luck. We'll have to wait and see this Tuesday.
There's a part of me that wishes he wasn't representing the Pistons this Tuesday, just because the magic of him getting the number 1 overall pick was so great. I don't want that to be. I don't know. I always like there's key moments when I think of Ben Wallace. Like I think of the championship when the Going to Work squad beat the Lakers. I think of the block on Shaq in Miami. And then I think about him holding up his finger just like this after they won the number 1 overall pick. Mm-hmm. And I don't want that to be tainted with like him being there and they get the 3rd overall pick. I just want that memory of him just holding up the finger and getting the number 1 overall pick. I mean, it would be cool if it happened again. I mean, that would just be crazy. I mean, I'm hoping that happens, but there's a part of me that's just like, yeah, it's not going to happen. And I just don't want to lose that memory, because then once I think of him holding up number 1, I'm going to think of, oh yeah, but then he was there a couple seasons later and they got the 5th pick. Sucks. Like I want to think of that.
Hey man, I'm going in with positive vibes. I'm not even thinking about 5th. 5th ain't happening. I'm farthest we're falling is 3. That's what I'm feeling, man. They're not gonna shaft us like that. They got to give us at least a top 3 pick. I got to stay positive. I can't go down the negative train, because if I do, then I'm gonna get depressed.
Yeah, I won't. Then we'll just end it there. I won't say any more negative thoughts. Ben Wallace, he's bringing home the number 1 overall pick this Tuesday. I'm going to put that out there. Positive thoughts only. James Edwards III released his top 10 free agent targets. I like a lot of the names that he listed, like all 10 names. I mean, I can see them working in Detroit. I mean, I really can, but I got 3 names that I really like. Austin Reeves, part of it is recency bias, because I mean he was cooking a little bit in the playoffs and he's still going to be playing. I mean, I don't ever think he leaves Los Angeles though. I don't think he's going to do that. I love Cam Johnson. We've talked about him quite a few times. And then I like Utah from Brooklyn. Strong 3-point shooter, great size for that 3 spot. Those would be my top 3. But what names do you like on the free agent target list?
I did want to read them off for people watching or, listening when we do drop this podcast tomorrow. So James had an article basically of his, top 10 names, restricted and unrestricted. So he had Jeremy Grant, Torrey Craig, Yuta Wananubi, who Jaden Ivey put a poster on, by the way.
Yeah.
Karis LeVert, Max Strus, Cameron Johnson, Grant Williams, Matisse Thybulle, Austin Reeves, and Cam Reddish. So out of this list, I think for defensive purposes, I love Torrey Craig. I
Mm-hmm.
think Torrey Craig you could get on the cheap. He's just a guy that hasn't really made a whole lot of money throughout his career, and is just a good role player. I think you could get him on the cheap, and he's a productive guy. Um, I got a lot of interest with Matisse Thybulle personally. I think as a defensive stopper, a guy that is versatile. I don't know if Portland will let him go because I believe he is restricted. I could be wrong with that, but he's just a guy that I think defensively makes a lot of sense for a team that wants to get better defensively. Obviously, he's a negative on offense. He doesn't really have an offensive game, but I think he would be a huge he would be an upgrade in my opinion over maybe a Hamidou Diallo, just on the defensive end of the floor. And I like Cam Reddish too. I think Cam Reddish is a guy that he's 23 years old. He kind of fits within that rebuild, and he's just a guy that, he went to Portland and they gave him minutes and he started producing. So I wouldn't be mad if the Pistons, took a swing at, a Cam Reddish. But obviously, you see the guys on here, Cam Johnson, which I personally think he goes to Houston. That's just my feeling. I think Houston having close to 60 million in cap space, no state income tax, and apparently he likes the city of Houston. That was a reporting that came out that he does like Houston a lot. If he were to leave Brooklyn, Houston is probably a destination where he would go. Yeah, Grant Williams too is another name, man. Like, I know we've talked about it before, but like he's a pretty good defender, but he's undersized. So
Yeah. So would you have these 10 free agents in this order, like ranking them from 1 through 10? Would this be your order? Would you have Torrey Craig at number 2, or would you shift some of these names around as guys? I mean, I guess if you had to shift them around, would you do it based on who you would like or based on their talent level? Because, I mean, Austin Reeves at 9 kind of blows me away a little bit. I think he would probably be in my top 3, just, as a free agent target, if I thought there was a possibility of bringing him in.
yeah, like I don't know. Obviously, like the wings this year, they're kind of all over the place. Obviously, you hear Jeremy Grant. I personally don't think Jeremy Grant would come back to the Pistons. I
Okay.
think he wants to be playing for a playoff team, even though the Blazers didn't make the playoffs, which is actually hilarious, by the way. And I think Jeremy Grant would cost a lot. He would probably eat up like 90% of your cap space, and I'd rather add more depth. Like I said, my wish list would be Cameron Johnson. Cameron Johnson to me would be one on my list if you're the Pistons, and I'd probably put like Grant Williams right behind him.
So Cam Johnson's your number 1 and Grant Williams is your number 2.
Yeah, like you need help on that wing, and I don't know where they're gonna fall in the draft. Like they could get number 1, and those guys could just like be completely off my board because you got Victor in there, and you could basically put him at a 4 or a 3 if you wanted to. He's just so damn tall and so skilled.
Where,
But
where would Matisse Thybulle though fall on that list for you though?
he'd be in my top 5 for sure. Just
Okay.
this for his defense alone, man. Like just a guy that's just a pesky defender, and I feel like whoever is the coach, they would value a player like that.
What about Cam Reddish though? Where does he fall on your list? Is he a top 5 get for you?
If you can get him on the cheap, yeah, because he's so young still. He's only 23. I think I'll be 24 next year. Which I know a lot of Pistons fans. We talked about it earlier this year. Like could the Pistons trade Sadiq for Cam Reddish? And obviously we didn't. But he's a guy I feel like a lot of the fan base is still very high on, and I can understand why. There's a lot of talent there. It's just hasn't really had a fair shot or opportunity since he's kind of been in the league. He had a little bit of opportunity in Atlanta, but like Tibbs just never played him, never used him, which there's a reason why he didn't, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at his numbers right now, and he's more of a scorer than anything. Like, kind of a weak rebounder, not a playmaker. And I mean, Tibbs wasn't playing him, so he's not a defensive player. I guess my biggest thing with Cam Reddish, and the only reason I'm talking about Cam Reddish this way is because I know a lot of Pistons fans love Cam Reddish because I don't know, everybody still thinks he's Tracy McGrady. But My biggest thing, and I've always repeated this on this podcast, is what else are you doing for the team outside of scoring? And I just don't know what that is for Cam Reddish. Like I don't know if his shot's not falling, do you still play him, or can he still be a part of your rotation if his shot isn't falling? Like that's my biggest thing with him. And that's why I would be more wary of investing money in him, even though he is young. But when I look at other names on this list, like you were saying, Matisse Thybulle, like, yeah, he's not the best offensive player, but like he brings other things to the team where even if his shot isn't falling, it's not going to hurt you that much because he can still lock people up on the defensive side.
Yeah, it's like with Cam Reddish, I kind of think of like how Isaiah Livers plays. Like that would probably kind of be his role, like spotting up in the corner, maybe taking it to the basket, more being in a scorer's role where, I think as, a coach, you kind of have to, protect your players and put them in the best possible position to succeed. And I think most coaches try to do that. And I don't think they'd really ask Cam Reddish to do too much. I'm not going to ask him to be a first option and, go get me the winning basket. I wouldn't really be too concerned with him. But like I said, he's a fringe starter, maybe a bench piece you could possibly get on the cheap.
And he is an NBA player, and the Pistons are they do not have enough NBA players on their roster to really compete. So even if he's like the ninth man, that's better than the ninth man this year. But let's talk about another free agent, restricted free agent though. PJ Washington. PJ Washington Jr.'s father shared a graphic on his Instagram with PJ Washington as a restricted free agent. I bet it was a list of, it was your graphic, right? It was top 10 fours.
Yeah. Right? The restricted fours that would be available this summer. And PJ Washington was at the top of my personal board because I felt like he was the best player. Arguably, you could say Rui Hachimura should be one, but I think PJ Washington would be interesting for the Pistons, especially with the two big lineup that they keep telling us that they want to continue to do.
Yeah, so if they were to sign him, what position would he be? Because I know he played more of a 4, kind of a little bit of a 5, but I think he played 5 more last year. And actually, lineups with him at the 5 spot, they were actually a plus. I believe like +3 or +5 the year that he played like 47% of his minutes or something at the 5. Like he's not a great defender, but he's not terrible on that end either. He's not going to block a lot of shots for you, but he's going to make things uncomfortable for people. But he's not really going to play the 5 in Detroit if you were to sign here. I believe he would be more of a 4. But outside of his defense, we're not going to talk. You're not signing him for the defense. You're signing him to be able to spread the floor. He's a good shooter. He's a spot up shooter. He doesn't create much for himself, but he's also a smart player. When that ball is kicked out to him, it's either going up as a shot or he's making defenders pay when they try to run him and close out on him and try to run him off that 3-point line. He's also become a much better passer on drives and kicks. So I don't know, the PJ Washington signing, I would actually be really excited for. Like I'm excited for the offensive side of the ball with him out on that floor, because with him, and again, I believe like if you bring in Monty Williams and you bring in PJ Washington, Monty Williams values space. Like they didn't take a lot of 3-point shots in Phoenix, but they valued space to create those looks that they were getting on offense. And I think, PJ Washington would just add to that. That would just be so much fun. That combination of coach and player with the Pistons. Like I would be very excited for PJ Washington Jr. I think on earlier podcast, I said I wouldn't be, but that's because I didn't do my homework on him. But now that I have, yeah, I'm very excited about PJ Washington. What about you though? How do you feel about him?
I think if you look at from the standpoint of our two big lineups last year, when we traded for Jalen Duren, we saw Wiseman and Duren out there together. I think if you were to insert a PJ Washington, he could be a solution for your 4, right? I think you could put him at the 4. I don't think you should put him at the 3. I think he's most suited at the 4, and I think defensively, he's able to switch defensively, and he's not terrible. He's like a plus defender. Yeah. To your point, I think he's got a good mid-range game. He can stretch it out from the outside. And he's a good player. The only problem you have with PJ Washington, and it's not his fault, is he's a restricted free agent.
Yep.
So are you going to get in a bidding war with the Charlotte Hornets, who are known to pay Terry Rozier 20 plus million, pay Gordon Hayward 30 plus million, or trade for Gordon Hayward, I should say. It's kind of a franchise that doesn't have any kind of financial stability, and they're willing to overpay for players. Now, that's my only thing is you're not going to get in a bidding war with them for over 20 million on a PJ Washington. I think if it gets to that, just let him resign in Charlotte.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But if you can get him at a reasonable deal, you got a four with Isaiah Stewart. Those could be your fours. You could have Isaiah Stewart and PJ Washington with James Wiseman, with Jalen Duren. So now you have four big guys on your lineup that can play defense, switch, and hit threes. I'm not forgetting Marvin Bagley. I just think PJ Washington would be an upgrade over Marvin Bagley. I know Bagley's a better post player offensively. He's got a deeper bag offensively, but he's kind of a negative on defense. And I think as Pistons fans, we can acknowledge his weaknesses on the defensive end of the floor. I think PJ Washington would be a plus, in my opinion.
Oh, it would be a huge upgrade at that four spot. Whether you start him or bring him off the bench, I mean, like I said, he shot 34% from three this year. He's a career 37% three-point shooter. That's me rounding up on 5 attempts. That's great to spread the floor and create that space in Detroit, which is what we need when you have Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham in your backcourt. So I would be all over PJ Washington, the signing. But you're right, that restricted, that kind of sucks because Charlotte most likely matches any offer that comes in. But
yeah.
Man, I don't know, man. I would still pursue it. I really think he's a player that should be on the Pistons radar. And he's young. He's only 24 years old. He will be 25, but he has experience. He's been a solid player for 4 seasons already. And yeah, I would love to see PJ Washington in Detroit. It'd be great.
Yeah, like I said, he'd be a good player, but we'll have to wait and see how free agency does fold out for our Pistons.
Dude, this is another fun one. Jonathan Kuminga. He wants out of Golden State unless they promise him or guarantee him a larger role. It feels like that never works out when people request that. Like, he's definitely going to be moved. Jonathan Kuminga still has a handful of potential. So the Warriors, it'd be wise of them to make a move and bring someone else in because that championship window is closing. And if you're not going to play this, I think he's only 20 years old too, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he wants out of Golden State unless they increase his role. Would you like the Detroit Pistons to take a chance on Jonathan Kuminga? Would you want them to trade him? I, for one, man, I want to say I do. I do like it because Jonathan Kuminga, he's a two-way player. There's still a lot of room before he reaches his ceiling. I don't know if he ever reaches his ceiling because there's a ton of talent. But I think it'd be worth it to take a chance on him in Detroit. But what about you? How do you feel about Jonathan Kuminga potentially ending up in Detroit?
I kind of feel like he falls under the same category as James Wiseman. He was a prospect that a lot of, when you talk to people, they thought he had like Jaylen Brown type of potential. He had the body, he had the size, he had all the physical tools offensively and defensively. But he falls under the same category as Wiseman as a young player that doesn't get playing time on a veteran team. Obviously, we just saw them lose to the Lakers, and he didn't get any playing time. Unless you're an absolute stud at 20 years old, you're not getting playing time. Unless you're like Anthony Edwards type of talent, you're not going to get playing time on the Golden State Warriors. You're just not. And I get he's not happy with his role. He's not happy that he's not playing, but Jordan Poole just stunk it up.
Yeah.
I am surprised that they looked at Jordan Poole and said, let's play Kuminga. Let's put him out there. Maybe he can help us out, but they didn't. To your question, do I want the Pistons to try to trade for him? I don't know. It's tricky. It really depends on the lottery. It depends like what we're hearing in free agency. If, they're, the big fish that we've talked about, like Cameron Johnson, Jeremy Grant Williams, or are they going to ask for a lot of money? It depends. Now, if they're asking for an absurd amount of money, basically all of our cap space, then you possibly consider it. He's a young player, but at the same time, Are you going to give him playing time over Isaiah Livers? Probably not.
I think I
He,
would.
he's a player that I think he needs some development. Like if you were to trade for him and you want to give him playing time, that's fine. But he's probably, off of your bench. He's not going to be starting for you. I think the Pistons want a wing or a three, a small forward that, can produce. And I think he just needs maybe a year or two to develop to where he's more confident. And I don't know if the Pistons really want to invest into another high lottery pick, invest into another player that they have to develop because they already have a a roster full of young talent that they're trying to develop. Adding another player to the puzzle where you gotta have to develop him, I think it kind of gets into a headache situation.
What if the Pistons were going to say, like, look, the James Wiseman, Marvin Bagley experiment is done, and they got rid of those two? Would you want to bring in a Jonathan Kuminga then? If there's less young players on this team that need to be developed, would you want to give them a spot? Because I think the talent is it's too much to pass up on.
Yeah, like I said, the Warriors would probably want a lot because they're kind of transitioning into, do they still feel like they can compete or do they want to tear it down? Because Draymond Green's going to be a free agent. They overpaid Jordan Poole. They have young guys like Moses Moody, Kuminga, where they're young players. These are supposed to be the guys that take over for Steph and Clay when they're basically going to retire. I don't know. They may be asking for a lot. They may be asking. Maybe they ask for a Bojan. Maybe they ask for a Alec Burks. Or maybe they ask for draft picks. They really don't have any.
I was just gonna say, like, if they said, "Give us Alec Burke, we'll give you Jonathan Kuminga," do you pull the trigger on that trade? I do, just because Jonathan Kuminga is shooting 37% from three this past season, shot 53% from the field. He did average 10 points, not the strongest rebounder, only averaged 3. But again, he's only playing 20 minutes per game, and he was playing between a 3 and a 4. Like, I don't even really know if he has a role there. It's just the potential of him as a two-way player is just so much. It's just too much to pass up on. Like, I even just said, and I was serious, like, I would give Isaiah Livers minutes to Jonathan Kuminga if he was in Detroit. Like, it's no offense to Isaiah Livers. It's just, there's just so much talent that is untapped with Jonathan Kuminga. I hate the nickname they gave him, but damn, like, it'd be so hard to pass up on a guy like that in Detroit, man. Man, that it's a lot, man. I don't know. How do other people feel about Jonathan Kuminga though? Like, what is ultimately I think Golden State keeps him. I don't think they would be stupid to give up on a 20-year-old because he played, I think, 21 games when Andrew Wiggins was sitting, and he averaged over 12 points per game and had a pretty decent role for them. And they were still winning with him in that role. So I don't know. Yeah. It just seems like the championship window is still open for Golden State, but they're also in a weird situation where they have a 20-year-old who needs playing time and needs time to work through his mistakes and to become the player that he possibly can be.
Yeah, with Kuminga, I think if I were Golden State, I would hold on to him.
Yeah.
I would develop him. Obviously, Andrew Wiggins is not going to be there forever. Andre Iguodala just retired. I think you could find a role for him. You could find minutes for him as a backup, forward on your team because, he can play both forward positions. He's versatile. Like you said, he's young. I just think, they're just in a really weird position that, they overpaid for Poole. Draymond needs an extension, like I just said. Steph's making an absurd amount of money. So is Klay Thompson. It's just, I don't want to say the Golden State Warriors dynasty is over because I don't think it is. I just think they need to retool, and Kuminga may be a guy that they try to float out this summer and try to get maybe a veteran, maybe a fringe sixth man of the year to try to get more offense off the bench for them. Obviously, they traded for Gary Payton, and I don't think Gary Payton was 100% healthy. I still think he was dealing with whatever he was dealing with. I believe it was like groin or ab injury or something like that. But I think for the Pistons, the Warriors will probably be asking a lot just because they're in a really weird situation right now.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Kuminga playing in Detroit is very unlikely. I still think he's going to be in Golden State, but there's a part of me that thinks like I'm trying to think of a center that could be, that would be perfect for the Warriors that I know is out there that they could possibly just flip Jonathan Kuminga and maybe Moses Moody for. Part of the reason you get these young players, you want them obviously to be a part of your future, but also when you have when the championship window is still open, like it is in Golden State, they're also very valuable trade assets that can bring you a piece that could help you continue to win now, which is what they want to do. So I don't know. Jonathan Kuminga's future is up in the air, but I don't think it's going to be in Detroit at all. So
no, I mean if it is, I'm ecstatic because that's
yes,
just a player where like if he's properly developed, he's a two-way player, right? And like we've talked about it, when we're doing our kind of like our NBA draft breakdowns of like two-way forwards and how they're so versatile. Like everybody wants those. Everyone wants the Kawhi Leonards, the Paul Georges, the Jaylen Browns. Like he has the potential to possibly be one of those guys. It's just he's a young kid. He's not getting playing time, and he's kind of frustrated with it. And he was a high pick too. You have to remember that. So I wish him well. I hope he does get playing time because I do cover some G League games. I watched him cook in the G League. I'm not gonna lie, man. Like he was way too talented to be down in the G League. I was just like, man, this kid's gonna be special.
don't you think it's kind of funny though that Golden State threw so much money at Jordan Poole when he was in the G League last year himself?
Was he in the G League last year?
I think he bounced from the G League at least at the beginning of the season. I thought he did last year, like bounced between them at the beginning of the season. I thought he did, but maybe
I'd have to check. I think it was 2 years ago he was in the G League, but
Mm,
yeah, I mean, Jordan Poole he's a good player. It's just
he's too
I, I
inconsistent.
think I think they just threw way too much money at him. I think if Golden State had to do all over again, they'd probably give Draymond an extension and let Poole walk or try to trade him for something.
They definitely should have tried to flip him after looking so good in the playoffs last year. Let's talk about another mock trade though that came through Bleacher Report.
For sure.
Just going to break this down for you guys. The Pistons receive the 2024 first round pick via the Detroit Pistons. So we would be getting, basically, it just means we're getting our protection back.
Yeah.
We get the 2024 second round pick, and then guard forward Evan Fournier, and then the Knicks would receive Bojan, which it's enticing, man. But I just like Bojan so much more than Evan Fournier. But the Pistons, they're kind of stuck right now trading their first round pick because basically they're not going to be able to trade a first round pick till 2029.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, their hands are tied. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I think I would do the trade just to get the protection back. And it sucks. I hate the Knicks for that, and I rooted for them this postseason. I hate them for that because I love Bojan, and I think even in his older age, he can still help the Pistons win. He's part of that foundation. Right. He's helped establishing a winning culture. But damn, that Troy Weaver's hands are tied without that protection out there. So, yeah, I think I would give a Bojan to get that back, and that just sucks. It sucks to say.
Yeah, so I'll kind of break it down for people that didn't see this article. So Bleacher Report basically wrote an article of the bottom feeders in the NBA and if trades like this would help them, get better. And essentially, like Lance said, the trade would be we would send Bojan to the Knicks. We would get the protections off of our first round pick. So we would be able to trade our first round pick without worrying about it. And we get a second round pick that the Knicks own next season. And we get Evan Fournier. When I was looking at this deal on the surface, a lot of Pistons fans are like, dude, hell no, that's stupid. Why would we trade one of our best players? I think if you're a fan and you look at cap space, Evan Fournier has a club option for $18 million. Meaning you could cut Evan Fournier and create $18 million worth of cap space, get a second round pick that was already yours that you traded away, and get the protections off of your first round pick in 2024 to where maybe you possibly trade a future first because next year's draft is going to be really shit. Like outside of like LeBron James's kid, there's just some players in there where you're just like, like, am I really too excited? Like, it's like a two-player draft next year. It's not a draft where you're like, wow, it's gonna be. It's not like this year where like we've talked about like Wemby, Scoop, Brandon Miller. Like it's not like that. Like next year's draft is complete crap. I think on the surface, I can understand why fans don't like it, but I would probably keep Bojan in this situation
Mm.
just because I don't really know what Evan Fournier would do in the NBA anymore. I haven't seen him play in a few years. It would be cool to get, some draft picks, some compensation back, but some Pistons fans have argued, hey, like we can get more for Bojan, and maybe you could, maybe you could get maybe a protected first, or maybe you could get some, seconds for a Bojan. You have to remember he's coming off an Achilles injury that the Pistons haven't really given us any updates, and he wasn't really walking on it towards the end of the season. So that's something I would monitor too if I'm a Pistons fan. That Achilles injuries can be pretty serious, especially when you're 33, 34 years old.
Yeah. So last year, I'm going to talk. Evan Fournier played 80 games, 80 starts for the Knicks, averaged 14 points per game, and shot 39% from three on 7 attempts, almost 8 attempts.
Okay.
8 attempts if you're rounding up. This year, he only played 27 games, 7 starts. It was a disaster. I actually drafted him in fantasy basketball towards the end, and he only shot 31% from three and 34% from the field. Like, he was a shell of his former self. But he's 30 years old. He's younger than Bojan. I still think there's some game left. He just happened to be in the doghouse with Thibs.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is, how is this a realistic trade? Because Bojan is not that good of a defender either. Like,
Yeah.
would he, I know he's a great offensive player, but would he even, I think there's still a scenario where Thibs doesn't even play him. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think, yeah, I mean, realistically though, because Thibs wants certain things out of his players that I don't feel like Bojan can deliver.
Yeah.
So even though he's a great offensive talent, I just don't understand how Bleacher Report said this is realistic, knowing who the coach is in New York. So, but again, I would trade Bojan to get that protection back, because I still think Evan Fournier has a little game left. But also, since you put that caveat in there, which I did not know about, of his contract being a team option, that even makes me want to make this trade even more, because
Yeah. I mean, I can understand why fans are like, hey, why are you giving up on our players? Why would you, trade Bojan?
yeah,
Like, obviously, this is a mock trade. This isn't real. This is just kind of like a fun article that we're reacting to from Bleacher Report. I think you have to look at the optics, like you said. He's got a club option for $18 million. You could create an additional $18 million worth of cap space, plus get your draft pick back, plus get a second round pick that you did trade for Jalen Duren to the Knicks. So you're getting draft picks, and you could possibly create $18 million in cap, plus the $28 million you already have. So you could get close to, $47-48 million in cap to play with, where you can kind of compete with the teams out there like the Spurs, and the Rockets in free agency possibly. Like that, from that standpoint, it makes sense. But I probably would keep Bojan, because I think if you did want to move him, you did want to trade him, I feel like there would be a better package available. This one to me kind of seems like a desperate Knicks attempt, trying to get more spacing, more shooting. And to your point, I think Tibbs would kind of overlook the defense just for the offense, just because he's such a good offensive player. And
yeah.
I just saw Julius Randle basically have a terrible, terrible game against the Heat, and I think he may turn his cheek for Bojan, giving him like 20 off the bench or 20 starting.
Yeah, and shooting 41% from the three on that would be so damn. I would miss that in Detroit. I don't know. It's a tough one though, because like I said, Bojan had a career year last year. He's going to be part of establishing that foundation going forward. He is 33. He's coming off an Achilles injury. that protection though, man, it's just no. He's actually 34. My bad. He just had a birthday. He's
Yeah.
34. So I don't know. I think I would pull the trigger on that trade, and I'm sure if you asked me that a couple months ago, I would not have said that. But again, man, just I don't know. I still think there's game left in Evan Fournier, but also team option. But then getting that protected pick back, that's huge for Troy Weaver. You know how he likes to mess around in the offseason, making some trades.
Yeah, like I said, if that was available, I think most Pistons fans would probably keep Bojan. But I can understand like people like you are like, hey, I want my pick back. Like, you got protections on it. I think it's like 2026.
Oh,
Something.
dude, this article says 2027.
Yeah, because that was from the Isaiah Stewart trade when we made with Portland for Trevor Ariza. Like, we're still paying for it.
That
Like,
trade has been.
that trade to me is just so crazy. Even though you put protections on it, like that's just absolutely insane.
Yeah, the protections are 1 through 18 in 2024. So that means if the Pistons get the 19th pick, it goes to New York, right? That's how that works.
Yeah, if the Pistons make the playoffs, they lose their draft pick. That's
Okay.
basically what it is. Like, if it's top 18 or 19 protected, they would have to at least be an eighth or seventh seed to lose it.
Okay.
So, I mean, even though there's heavy protections on it, obviously, like as a fan, like if I were to want to make a trade for my first round pick, I want the protections off of it.
Yep.
Like, this is something I did want to transition into another topic.
Okay.
So when we traded for Blake Griffin, we traded Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban, and a first round pick.
Yep.
And if you kind of think about that, that's kind of crazy. Like, you didn't really have to give up a star for a star, right?
Yeah.
Do you believe the Pistons, as constructed right now, have enough to go trade for a star right now?
Without losing Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, or Jalen Duren, no, I don't. I don't think they have enough to trade for a star.
No, I mean like including them.
Oh, I mean, if you're including them, yeah, but I don't think you would get one of like the tier 1 or tier 2 stars in the NBA. And I mean, like, I don't. It kind of is crazy saying Cade probably wouldn't net you a top 15 player because I think at the end of his rookie season, you probably could have made a case where he could have got you a top 15 player back. But with the injury, with the multiple injuries he's had early in his career, I think that's thrown out the window. Jaden Ivey might get you. Jaden Ivey and Cade and Jalen Duren, they might get you a top 25 player, but I don't think they get you. And, I mean, it might be like a DeMar DeRozan, that they get you back, or like an aging star. They might do something like that. Like, if you consider Russell Westbrook a star, yeah, they might be able to get him back or something. But
that's what I was thinking, because like, even if we sign some vets this offseason, maybe we get like another Alec Burks type or another Bojan type, like, the Pistons, when SVG was still making the shots, still making the calls, like Tobias Harris was the player in that deal that was probably the best player on the Pistons side, and the Clippers were happy to get off that contract. I just asked that question because like we've accumulated talent with Cade, Ivy, and Duren. I think in a few years you may kind of see like a similar swing for a star that maybe an organization wants to get rid of. But that's just something I've been thinking about lately. I was just like, man, I said, we really got Blake for basically nothing. Like, the first round pick turned into Miles Bridges.
What was I thought the first round pick turned into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
No, that wasn't our pick. That was because the Clippers had 2 picks.
Okay, that's right. I forgot that part. Yeah, so man, that is interesting. Yeah. Do you think Troy Weaver is the GM that would make a trade like that, though, to bring in a star before the team is ready?
I don't know, because like I think if you look back to when Stan was here, like that 2015-16 roster when we won 44 games, like I think the starting five was Reggie, KCP, Marcus Morris, Tobias Harris, Andre Drummond, and like we were winning games, 44 games. Like we haven't won that since SPG eventually did get fired. I believe that Troy could make a trade like that. It's just we haven't really seen more than like I think 24 wins so far. But I feel like if we make a jump this season and like let's say we're like at 30 wins, maybe he pulls that trigger. Maybe Tom Gores gets a little bit like, hey, like we got a lot of talent. Like let's try to go get Brandon Ingram. Like let's go try to get Jaylen Brown. Like let's go get another wing to help Cade out. Like I feel like you kind of have to keep an eye on that situation because I think it will come. And I think the only way we can really like get a star is if we trade for one. Like I can't remember the last time that we signed a star in free agency that was in his prime. Like
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember. Like maybe Chauncey, but Chauncey wasn't really regarded as a star. Like he was a high lottery pick that kind of bounced around in the league. Like I think for the Pistons, they always kind of trade for that star player, and I think I could see that within the next year or two of where maybe we make progressions in the win total and we try to trade for that wing. Like I said, maybe an Ingram, maybe a Jaylen Brown, maybe I don't know, maybe you take a gamble on Zion Williamson. I really don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like, okay, let's. Do you think that they could? Let's say they get the number 2 overall pick this year. Let's just say Let's say they fall to 2, and there's a team that really wants Scoot Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
Could you see them? Could you see a team? We were kind of joking around about this, but you mentioned Brandon Ingram's name. Like, if the Pelicans really believe in Zion Williamson that he can figure it out and become healthy, do you think that the Pistons could trade the 2nd overall pick for like a Brandon Ingram type player who's on the verge, I think, of being one of those top 15 players in the NBA?
I think they would be more open to trading Zion than they would Brandon Ingram personally.
Interesting. Okay.
And I know that sounds crazy, but I think with Zion, it's the talent's there. It's just the health isn't. And I don't know if it's maybe a mental part of his game because like we see him in the summer, he looks jacked, looks like he's in the kind of like Miguel Cabrera, best shape of his life type of shit. And then like he's like overweight by like training camp and stuff. I don't know. I think if you get Zion out of New Orleans, I think he has a better career. That's just my opinion. I've told you that before. But with the Ingram thing, I think Ingram, to me, I think he could be a top 25 player next year. Just because, the offense is there, the defense has gotten better each and every year, and they just have a really nice core down there. All they really need is a point guard. Like if we're at 2 and they want Scoot, like you could have that conversation.
So do you think it would be worth trading? Let's say the Pelicans do say, hey, look, we'll give you Zion Williamson for the number 2 overall pick. And you get Zion, let's just say Zion Williamson's here for like 5 seasons, but you only get 2 healthy seasons from him. Do you think 2 healthy seasons of Zion Williamson with Cade, Jaden Ivey, and Duren would be worth it for the number 2 overall pick?
Oh, 100%.
Okay, that's what I thought too. I think.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know we're talking crazy right now, but it's just like that. These are the hypothetical things that I think about. I was just like, I said, I know the Pistons are going to make a blockbuster trade. I just have a feeling. It's probably not going to be this year, maybe not next year, but soon. Like, it's going to get to the point where you're going to have this young talent and you're going to have to make a move because like you're not a LA, you're not a New York. You can't get these, big name free agents. You're going to have to make trades and try to, propel yourself up in the Eastern Conference. So, dude, Zion to Detroit would be scary. And Cade actually said he's one of his favorite players he likes to watch.
It's funny too, because a couple of years ago, this is how stupid I am. I had said that I would not trade Sadiq Bey for Zion Williamson. But the reason I said that is because I thought Zion Williams, because I really believe that he would get healthy. But I also thought that I said the reason I wouldn't make that trade is because Zion Williamson would bolt at the end of his contract, and you would not get anything for it. I'd rather keep a lesser player that might be here for 10, 12 years and contribute versus having it. But man, if you could get Zion Williamson and you could just get him to be healthy for 2 years, I think it would 100% be worth it. But let me ask you this. Say the Pistons do get the number 1 overall pick and they draft Victor Wembanyama. I still can't believe I can't say his last name.
Wembanyama.
Yep. Just Victor W. I practiced in the car and I still got it wrong. But anyways, if you get Victor W. with the number 1 overall pick, and let's say he has a Yao Ming like career where he plays for 8 or 9 years, but he's only healthy for like 5 of them. Is that worth it with the number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, I mean, if people already saying like, he's too skinny, he's too fragile, he's going to end up like Chet Holmgren. Like, we don't know. We're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he's 7'3", 7'4", and he's 230. That tells me he can put on weight. I don't. Did you see that picture that? I don't know if OKC put it out, but it might have been a Thunder fan, and it was just like Chet Holmgren's been in the gym, and like someone did like a side by side picture of Chet Holmgren when he got drafted, and then Chet Holmgren so like when he was rehabbing, he looked the same. Like it didn't look like he gained any weight whatsoever. I think Victor's going to be fine. I think whoever gets him, generational type of talent, franchise player immediately. I think he's fine. I would take 5 years of a healthy Victor if he only played 8 in the NBA. I think everybody watching that would take that. There's risk with drafting guys that are that tall and that skinny. But I feel Victor can put on the weight. I feel like he has the body type where he can put on the weight. And I think any franchise in the lottery that wins it, they're doing cartwheels for 3 days straight. Like,
I mean, the only reason I brought that up is because I was listening to a Spaces the other night, and there was a Pistons fan in there talking about how his hot take is he would not draft Victor W. with the number 1 overall pick because he has injury concerns. And I started thinking like, he's younger than Yao Ming coming in. Yao Ming was 22 years old when he came and started playing for Houston, and he averaged. I mean, he was an all-star, but that's not the one. That's the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that he's younger than Yao Ming. I think you're going to get a few more years out of him, but there is that real injury risk with tall players like that. I don't think Victor Wembanyama is going to add too much more weight onto his body, but I do think he's going to add functional strength, like a stronger core, a stronger base, so he can't get pushed around, so he can actually push a few people around. I just don't think it's all about adding weight for Victor Wembanyama, but adding just functional strength that's going to keep him healthy. But again, my point was like, even if you only get 5 years of Victor W and he only plays for 8 or 9, I think that's still worth it with the first pick. Like he can be a franchise player for 5 years, and that's good enough. Like that's a good long window for you to compete and contend, especially with the other young guys you have on this team. So, I mean, you're crazy if you're going to say you wouldn't draft Victor W. number 1 overall because you're concerned he won't be able to play 10 years in the NBA. I don't think it matters when he's that talented.
Yeah, I agree with you, but man, some of the hot takes I've seen on Victor calling him Darko 2.0. It's just like I can't with fans. I can't tell who's trolling half the time or who's serious, but like it's a good laugh. I can't wait for this Tuesday. I really can. I can't wait to see what pick we get. I'm so excited. Like I think every Piston fan watching right now is just anxious. They're excited. They're nervous. Like I can't wait, man.
Oh, neither can I. I mean, I'm just so unbelievably excited for this because I feel like this is going to be the last time we're going to be drafting in the top 5 for a few
about
years. That's I'm just saying that's how I feel. That's how I feel. I mean, I'm still putting in there. We could be 6th the next year. That's still out of the top 5, but I do feel like this is going to be one of the last seasons we're drafting in. No, I'm going to say this is the last season we draft in the top 5 unless injuries happen. Let me just put that in there. But with a healthy team, I don't think this next year will be drafted in the top 5.
For sure. Do you want to do some Q&A questions?
Of course, man.
Okay, so this is from MB Well. He had asked us, I think this is more of a statement than a question. I believe the Pistons will make a surprise announcement soon. The lackluster progress is getting stale. Yeah, probably new head coach.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be the huge announcement.
Yeah, for sure. New head coach. We're getting assistant GMs possibly, unless Troy just hires more of his friends, which I hope he doesn't, because we all know how the Rob Murphy stuff is going on right now. But we need two assistant GMs because we just lost two, so there's going to be a lot of Piston news this summer for you guys.
We should open up the floor to MB Well to comment what he thinks the huge announcement will be.
For sure.
Yeah. So if you want to just share it, we'll find it and we'll post it on the screen. Because I want to know what you think the huge announcement's going to be. Do you think it's going to be a trade? Do you think it's going to be a free agency signing? Do you think it's just going to be a coaching hire, like we just said?
I think it'll be a coaching hire. I think our coaching hire will probably be next week.
Do you think it comes before or after the lottery?
After.
Okay.
Yeah, because if we get the first pick, I bet you every coach is lining up to coach the Pistons. But if we're at 5, they're probably like, yeah, I'm okay. You got to think of it from that standpoint. Like if the Pistons win the lottery and they have a chance at Victor Wembanyama, I think a lot of coaches would line up to coach the Pistons.
Do you think there's any chance that if the Pistons get the number 1 overall pick, there might be a repeat of when they had the 2nd overall pick when they drafted Darko? Do you think that there's any chance Troy Weaver overthinks it and misses on the pick? Or do you think he's just straight Victor W no matter what?
I think the straight Victor no matter what. I don't even think you could even entertain Scoot or Brandon Miller at 1, even though I did a Fanspo mock draft and they had Victor hit 3 and Brandon Miller at 1. I was just like, dude, I love Fanspo for their trade machines and their mock drafts, but I let the robot do that. I'm like, bro, what? If you guys haven't heard of Fanspo, check it out. You can do a lot of it's like the ESPN trade machine, but it's just on steroids. There's a lot of stuff you can do in there, but
I believe that's where you can trade picks and everything too. I think I was playing around with that one.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a really cool website. We do have another question. Is Miller better than Scoot?
Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, I mean, I've always I have not said who I think is better of the two. I just said who I would draft with the number 2 overall pick, because between these two players, Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson, I really think the gap is. Some fans make the gap so wide that Scoot is way over here and Brandon Miller's way over here. I don't believe that. I believe it's a lot closer. I just think a lot of people think Scoot is that much better than Brandon Miller because he's the better athlete. Scoot Henderson is an incredible athlete. He's probably in the top 1% when he gets to the NBA. But I value 6'9" two-way players a little bit more than I value athletic 6'2" guards. So I would take, I think right now Brandon Miller is more of the complete player because he has a little bit more experience. He's a two-way player. I know some people say his defense is mediocre, but then on the other side, some people say his defense is pretty good. So I don't know who you have to listen to. If you follow people that say he's a good defender, he's a two-way player, and I think that makes him better than Scoot Henderson right now. It's just that Scoot Henderson's ceiling is higher than Brandon Miller's because he is younger and he is more athletic. But again, I just don't think the gap is that large right now between the two.
Yeah, I think who's better? I think I could have a whole podcast who's better, who's worse.
Yeah.
But if you're just saying best player available, obviously you're going Scoot. I think you could even throw Amin Thompson at 2. I think there's definitely a conversation with Amin, Scoot, and Brandon Miller. They're all talented. But I think Scoot has the higher ceiling. I believe Brandon Miller to me would be a better fit for the Pistons.
Yeah.
So that's the best way I can answer this question. Who's better? It honestly depends. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a guy that could get you more in the open trade market, then that's Scoot Henderson. You're looking for a guy that could fit seamlessly next to Cade Ivey and Duren, then that's Miller. So that's just what I'll leave with it, because, like I said, it's just such a vague question. Who's better? And like, there's some people in here that think Miller's better than Scoot, and there's other people on Twitter that think Scoot could like fall to 4. Like it's honestly insane. Like when you get into these conversations, and with our luck, we'll probably have the second pick.
I mean, I think if you were to have these two players play one-on-one, Scoot Henderson would probably win. Yeah. But I think if you were to, I think Brandon Miller would thrive better in certain systems, I guess, than Scoot Henderson, because of his skill set and what he brings to a team. But I don't know, man. You're right, man. It is really tough just to say who is better. I mean, they both offer unique things. It's just, man, it's hard to pass on a 6'9" two-way player, man. It really is.
Yeah, like I said, I think I've told you I like Brandon Miller a lot. I think the only concerns you have with him is his elevation on his jump shot, which he has very little elevation, and his shot could get blocked very quickly. But that's his nitpicking. Like, I think he's a good playmaker. I think he's a good 3-point shooter. I think has the potential to be a two-way wing. There's a lot to like there, and there's negatives and positives with Scoot too. And like I said, none of these prospects are perfect coming out, but personally, I would draft Scoot just because best player available to me is a philosophy that I would follow if I have less than 35 wins. That's just me. But
I still think fit needs to be thrown in that equation though when it comes to value of a player. Like, I mean, if you were talking like because I mean, I've seen some fans say like, well, if it doesn't work in 2 years, you can just trade Scoot Henderson. Okay, but I mean, if you're drafting a guy at 2 and you only give him for 2 years, that kind of sucks, no matter how talented he is, versus a guy that could play for your team for like 6, 7, 8 years, at the same spot. So, I mean, I think that needs to be thrown in the equation, and people are too quick to throw that out the window when it comes to prospects. But
yeah, I just think people automatically assume that Cade Ivey and Scoot would start when I don't think they would. I think one of them would come off the bench and one of them would accept the role, because I was thinking about it. Like the Pistons had Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars and Vinnie Johnson. Like Vinnie Johnson could have started in basically any team, but he came off the bench. Like one of those guys could be a 6-man. Same with Golden State. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Jordan Poole. Like 3-guard lineups can work. It's just you're not going to play them all in the same lineup. One of them's going to come off the bench and kind of lead that second unit. And that's where I think it could work with Scoot Henderson if you have him off the bench, and you probably get rid of Killian in that situation.
But I think we've talked about this before. I think it works really well with Steph, Klay, and Jordan Poole because all 3 of those guys can also play off the ball. You have 2 guys that can create shots. Well, Steph Curry, he is a very creative shot creator. Klay Thompson, not so much. Jordan Poole, they wanted him to be, but I think it works because all 3 of them can play off the ball. And I know Jaden Ivey can play off the ball. People keep saying Cade can play off the ball, but I need people to point this out to me. I don't really remember what he was like what he's been like off the ball in Detroit early on. I felt like when I've watched him play when he was off the ball, it was a lot of standing around. And if that's what you want from Cade, just to have Scoot Henderson on the team, I just think that's a waste of his talent. I don't want to see Cade standing around. Now, if he's going to move like Steph Curry or even like a Nikola Jokic, like I am so impressed with the way the Joker moves without the ball. Like that's what great players do. And if Cade's going to move like that, yeah, then draft Scoot Henderson. You know what I'm saying? If you're going to get Cade and Jaden Ivey to play off the ball like Steph, Klay, and Jordan Poole can and make it work that way, fine, draft Scoot Henderson. I'll say it, draft them. But if you can't get them to play that way, I think you should go Brandon Miller because I think it's ultimately better for your team in the long run.
I agree. Like I said, I want to get on to the next question because I know me and you could debate over Scoot and Brandon Miller for another 2 hours.
I know. I mean, it's fun though.
kind of unfair to all the other people that have asked questions, and we probably won't get to them. Let's see. This is from Chris. How much movement you think happens for the Pistons this offseason?
I definitely think there's going to be, I would probably say at least 3 or 4 new names on this team. And there's going to be some players that we've grown to love that are no longer going to be on this Pistons team. So I would say, I don't even know how to put that, like medium to high movement this offseason for the Pistons.
Yeah, I think I have told you, like, I don't really expect us to make free agency splashes. I think if players like Bojan become available, Troy will use his cap space that way. Or on draft night. It seems like draft night, that's like his Super Bowl where he's just making trades, he's willing to deal. And like if there's someone that he likes a lot, he might trade up in the draft and use the cap space that way. I don't really see us being that active during free agency because if you do look at the free agents this year, I mean, it's pretty rough. Like, are you going to get Kyrie Irving? No. Um, are you gonna try to splurge for Cameron Johnson? I mean, it depends who you ask. Like, are you really gonna pay him $25 million? I don't know. Um, I think they're just gonna add more vets to try to just mentor these young guys and try to put them in a position to win more than 20 games. And I think that should be the goal if you're Detroit.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be big names. I think it's going to be like, a Torrey Craig level player, those type of names coming in. Like maybe a PJ Washington if Charlotte doesn't want to match, maybe a Kelly Oubre because, I mean, that guy bounces around every offseason. You know what I'm saying? And if you bring in Monty Williams, maybe it entices a Kelly Oubre. And it doesn't need to be a big name. It's just you have to get more established NBA players on the Pistons roster. Like, I need Ronnie Magruder to be the 15th man. I don't need him getting minutes next year, unless it's like in a like an emergency. Like, you got tons of injuries. That's the only time I want to see Ronnie Magruder. I still want to see him on the roster. I just don't want to see him play. I mean, I want him to be the 15th man. If he's the 15th man, your team's a lot better than him being the 9th player in your rotation.
Yeah, 100%. It's just I just don't know how active they'll be. I mean, I think the most active I saw them was Troy's first year when he, traded for Jeremy Grant, signed Mason Plumlee. Like, that was probably the most active I've ever seen him. He's always active on draft night. I just don't know if I don't want fans getting the impression that, we got close to $30 million in cap space and we're going to be super aggressive because I just don't know. I don't know like what their goal is. Like, do they want to be serious or they want to continue to develop? Because I feel like that's a word that just gets thrown out so much, and it's just like I feel like fans every time they hear the develop word, they just cringe.
Yeah, because a veteran can't still develop and get better.
Yeah, for sure. This question comes from Ryan. Shout out to Ryan, dude. He's on every. I don't think he's missed a podcast since we started. And I do remember him from when I was doing Above the Rim at Drew, too. So, Ryan's
That's
OG. He said, do you foresee us getting a realistic trade offer for the number 2 pick? Since teams know we would be willing to dangle him for the right price, teams will then know he's obtainable.
Yeah, I think if the Pistons got the number 2 overall pick, there'd be a handful of teams that would be willing to, that are going to be calling Troy Weaver to get a deal done. Because with Troy Weaver, you just never know. Because, I mean, in any other draft, you'd really want the number 2 overall pick. It just kind of sucks that it's a point guard that's probably going to go number 2 when you have Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. It just kind of sucks. But I do think if the Pistons get the number 2 overall pick, there will be some realistic trade offers that come through. And we're going to hear a lot of rumors after the lottery, I think, with Detroit. Regardless of where they're picking, I think you're going to hear a lot of like trade rumors are centered around that pick.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if they get the number 2 pick, I think teams will be interested, especially if they feel like Scoot Henderson is available. Yep. And maybe you can get a trade package for it. But yeah, I don't really know what a right price would be if the Pistons were at 2. And in that situation. But we're gonna have to wait and see this Tuesday to see where we are picking at. Let's try not to talk about this guy for 30 minutes.
Okay.
Let's just try. How do you feel about Killian going into next season?
I knew the moment you said 30 minutes, I knew who this is going to be about. I don't know. I feel kind of mixed about Killian. Like I've said this before in the podcast, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree with me. If Killian, I want to see him just make a complete role change if next year playing for the Pistons. He's never going to be a starting point guard in the NBA. He's never going to lead the team. The playmaking stuff is cool. I don't care about that. I want to see him maximize his defensive talents. I mean, Matisse Thybulle's been able to carve out a little nice career being a defensive specialist. Let's just see Killian do it. I mean, if you can get the playmaking going after Jaden Ivey or Cade Cunningham kick it out to you where, teams are closing out on you and you got to run it and you got to take 2 dribbles and make a play. That's all I want to see Killian Hayes do. I'd rather see the role simplified. I'd rather have him see less responsibility. And I just want to see him put the clamps on guys because I think that's the way Killian Hayes makes it in the NBA. It's not as a point guard. It's as a defensive specialist because he is a very good defender. And I mean, I don't think the shot's ever going to be consistent enough for him to be a full-time starter. But, I mean, if he could be a defensive specialist off the bench for Detroit or any other team, that's where I think it's going to go. But I'm just numb on Killian Hayes going into next season.
Yeah, for me, I think Killian has kind of carved a niche of what he'll be in the league, and I think he'll just be a backup throughout his career, and that's okay. Yeah. I've always said if he can be a Marcus Smart type player for the Pistons, I'm fine with that. I can accept that. Play defense, set up the offense, hit a couple of threes here and there. If he can do that, I'm fine. Like I'm not gonna be up in arms of. I don't know if you've seen the TikTok. There's this guy on TikTok that hates Killian Hayes, and he's got over 100 videos. It's like Killian Hayes Part 100, where he just like rips Killian Hayes. But like I'm not to that point where I'm ripping on our players. I just want him just to be. Just the average role player, like this find, like you said, find your role and just be a player that's not a negative on the offensive end. Because it seems like throughout his career, it's always been 5 versus 4 with him because he's kind of been a little bit too hand shy to shoot from 3 or stuff like that. But I think this year is probably the most progression I've seen out of him. And I would hate to kind of give up on a player where he's taken a stride in progression and then like watch him skyrocket. Like if we gave up on him, because that would just be a typical Pistons thing where like we give up on a player too young and he starts getting more confident and he starts putting it all together.
But do you want to see him playing point guard with Cade and Jaden Ivey on the floor?
No, he can just be the backup point guard.
Yeah, but I mean, if he's here next year, you're definitely going to see some lineups with all 3 of those guys out on the floor. Like the cool thing is they all have great size for their positions. It's just even if Killian is, I would hate if Killian is playing with Cade and Jaden Ivey next year and he's bringing the ball up the floor and initiating the offense. That's weird for me because I don't need that from Killian anymore. I just need you to lock guys up. That's all I want you to do. Your defense is good enough for you to be that guy. And then, like I said, just have like a Bruce Brown type role. I would like to see him kind of in that type of role, like how Bruce Brown plays in Denver. Like, yeah. Hard cuts, only can shoot from one corner. Like after he cuts and gets the ball, he's smart enough and has the IQ to make a good pass or make the right pass. Killian can play a role like that.
Like I said, people actually had mentioned Bruce Brown's name in the chat, so got to give them credit for that, and you credit for that for bringing it up. But I think you wouldn't see Cade and Ivey on the floor together because I don't think the new head coach would put him in the position that like if Cade and Ivey are on the floor, Killian's on the bench. Like we got to remember a new coach coming here is going to have different lineups, different rotations, different schemes. Maybe he just feels Killian's a corner 3-point shooter and he just wants him to shoot corner threes, play defense, and pass. I think he'd be an upgrade over Corey Joseph as a backup point guard, and that's all I really want to see for him. It's just be our backup point guard. This is a prove it year. You can prove to me that you can set up our offense. You can be consistent enough. You can, lead the second unit. I'm fine with that. I don't need you putting up 25 points a game. I just need you to be a plus, not a negative on the offensive floor.
Man, give me another backup point guard and let Killian Hayes carve out a new role. That's what I want to see.
All right, man. Like I said, I didn't want to spend too much time because every time we talk about
You know,
Killian, like we've probably spent at least 2 hours this year just talking about Killian Hayes on topics. I swear. This is actually a really good question from Spiral. Um, Roster talent has a huge effect on win-loss records. So why do people evaluate former head coaches by their record and not the type of plays they run and how those plays translate to our roster?
I think it's just because there's not enough information on what the coaches are running. I mean, like, I feel like when I'm watching certain team, even when I'm watching the Pistons, I feel like there's not a good enough breakdown what they're doing offensively when I'm watching the games. You know what I'm saying? Like when I watch games, I kind of want to learn a little bit and I don't know where to go. That is a great question because we really do just go off of win and loss records when it comes to coaches. And nobody really ever talks about how they run their offense and how the roster they're going to fits into what their offensive philosophy or defensive philosophy is. And I just think it's because the NBA and like the NBA shows do a terrible job. They'd rather talk about the narratives and the rumors rather than breaking down a play. Like when you watch like NFL shows, dude, they got great coaches doing the X's and O's and showing you how the play develops and breaks down. I want to see guys like that doing it with the NBA. I think Tim Legler does that, and Kenny Smith does a little bit on NBA TNT, but I feel like it's just not enough, and that's why it's hard for us to really talk about coaches and the types of plays that they run and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like JJ Redick and Tim Ledger, as you said, they do a phenomenal job of breaking down just games, playoff series. Having people on their podcast that, like you said, that it's very informative. And to Spiral's question, I think it's more media driven. Like when you have entertainment businesses like ESPN, they're always following the narratives, the storylines, and not really giving you like basketball in its purest form, where it's just like they're breaking down. Well, the reason why Monty Williams got fired was because of this, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't really say that like, oh well, it's because Kevin Durant didn't like him. Like I'm just giving an example. Kevin Durant. I don't know if Kevin Durant has beef with Monty Williams. Probably doesn't, but you get what I'm saying. It's all narrative driven, and I think that's why you don't kind of see that in the NBA. I think the NFL does a little bit of a better job because Roger Goodell doesn't like fun.
Well, I love when they break down the plays though in the NFL. Like it's so cool, but also if you are looking for someone to follow on Twitter that breaks down basketball plays, Steve Jones Jr., man, with I think it's like the Dunker Spot podcast with Nikias Duncan. Dude, that guy is awesome on Twitter, man. He breaks down so many plays and like I have alerts turned on for him. And like I follow him for his WNBA coverage too, because he's so good at breaking down the plays. And when you read his tweet and then you watch the video, you get a much better understanding of what a team is trying to run. Like I've loved Steve Jones on Twitter, man. He's awesome.
Yeah. Steve Jones, Nikias.
Yep.
The guy, I love listening to Nikias, just like on his podcast and stuff like that. I mean, he's so, it's just a different voice. I think that's why I like it. It's not like, like a big name where it's not like a Bill Simmons, where he's talking about the Celtics for like 2 hours and then talks basketball and just spews out nonsense bullshit. It's more pure, and I think that's why so many people like Steve Jones and Nikias. This is another question from Chris, which I love it because we talked about this last week with RJ Hampton talking about, Detroit, it differs from Orlando. But his question was, other than the weather, why do you think Detroit has a hard time getting free agents? We got loyal fans that will treat you like kings, nice downtown. The culture in the city is amazing. I don't get it.
I think part of it was Detroit's been kind of they've been up on the past few years. there was a while where they were hurting for a long time, and it was. I'm not trying to put any disrespect people, but it just wasn't. It wasn't what it was for a while. You know, Detroit was. It was down on its luck, man, and I think with LCA being in downtown Detroit, you're going to see more players want to come play for Detroit. But they were in Auburn Hills when there was literally nothing going on. Like, I think what they had like a McDonald's or something or a Steak and Shake right next to there where you could go get food before you left. Like, having LCA downtown, it helps. But also, I don't know, just the narrative around the city of Detroit. I think that has a lot to do with it when it comes to players, man. Like how people talk about the city of Detroit is that I think that's how it affects it. But also, like what me and Anthony were saying, Detroit has never been a team where they go after big name free agents. They've always been guys that have kind of found the underdogs and made it work, you know?
Yeah. I think I don't want to say players don't want to play here because I don't think that's true. I just think if you look over the past 15 years, the Pistons haven't really been good. The 2004 championship was a long time ago, and it's like that culture that Chauncey and Ben and Rip built. It's on life support. Like it's non-existent. It's not really there anymore. I think that's a big reason why you don't really see like the marquee names sign here. That's why you always see the Pistons, in trade rumors trying to trade for, said stars like Blake, whatever. But I think you can restore the culture if you start winning. And I think when you start winning, you start getting those names to come to you. Like I think of Milwaukee. Like Milwaukee, before Giannis really like took a huge step in development, like they weren't really getting big names. But once Giannis started, putting like those 20, 30-point games together, you see them trade for Drew Holiday. I mean, they even have to trade for stars.
Yep.
You see them get Brooke Lopez. You see them get Jay Crowder, which they didn't even freaking use, which is so damn funny. They traded 5 second-round picks and they didn't use the damn guy. But you get my point. Like,
Yeah.
once you start winning, you can start getting those names. I mean, like, when the Pistons at their peak from, like, 2003 to 2008, I mean, they got Antonio McDyess. And at the time, that was a big free agency get. You have to remember that. Like, once you start winning, you will get those free agent targets. It'll be more of an attractive standpoint because it's really hard to sell to a free agent, hey, we won 17 wins, come play here, versus, hey, we just won 50 wins, come play here. I think most of the time the player is going to go for the team that has more success than a rebuilding team that's trying to get back to that point.
Do you think like ownership had anything to do with it too, like how they treated former players? Because there was that time where like Rasheed Wallace was like not welcomed in Detroit. It seemed like, even though he had been sitting on the bench, but it just seemed like his relationship with Tom Gores was kind of sour. I think that played a part into it, but also I think it's hard for Detroit too because you got to find guys with like the right personalities, like guys that are like very charismatic that care about their brand. They're going to get more out of it in teams like at like cities like LA or New York.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like they're going to get more out of their brands playing for those major markets. I feel like with Detroit, what kind of has hurt them, but also what makes them so unique is that you kind of got to find guys that are a little bit more humbled, quiet, kept to themselves. And those guys, it's they're not always the stars of the league. You know what I'm saying? They're very good players. They can be all stars. They're just not going to be the names, people talk about all the time. So I think with Detroit, you just got to be selective of who you bring in too.
Yeah, like I said, I think winning cures all. I think once you start winning, you're gonna get those free agents that you see like, oh, can we get Kyle Kuzma? Right? I'm just throwing him as an example. I think if you're winning more games, then yeah, that he would probably want to come home, and they were in a better position. I think once you start, winning games, winning playoff series again, then you're gonna get those attractive names in free agency that every fan base wants. And I think we can get there. It's a process. And I know we've been kind of preaching that for the last 15 years, but you have to remember, like, we've never really had a full-on rebuild. Like the first rebuild with Joe Dumars after the Go in the Work crew, Tom Gore stripped it down after 2 years.
Yep.
When he traded for Brandon Jennings, like he was impatient. He wanted to win. And then, He hired Van Gundy, and we all know how that ended. Like, obviously, we made the playoffs, but like I said, we had bad contracts. We just were in a terrible space financially. But I think the way Troy has built the team, it's going to be set up for long term success, and you can have clean cap space, and you can have a great young core to build with. So I think the future is bright. You just have to stay patient, and I know fans don't want to hear that. I understand it. Like I said, I told you I tuned out last week, like in March, because I was like, dude, I'm not watching March basketball. I'm not getting excited for Buddy Boeheim and Jared Roden. No disrespect to them, but I'm just not.
Yeah, it's hard to get excited about players that their futures are very limited with
Yeah.
this team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people didn't know about the Sheed stuff either.
Oh, really? I thought that was like kind of common knowledge. I thought him and Tom Gores did have
Yeah,
a
I mean,
feud.
he had posted it. I think it's still on one of his Instagrams. Um, he was really upset that they decided to move out of the palace, and then they basically demolished it
Mhm.
for condos. And I know Rashid said that, like, in the post, that him and Tom Gores aren't close, but like Tom Gores has invited Ben Wallace and Rip Hamilton, even Jerry Stackhouse, to events. So I don't know how the relationship is. Like I said, I don't talk to Rashid. I don't even know Rashid, so I'm not really sure. But like, I would imagine he would try to repair any kind of relationship if it's rocky, because like Rashid's a big reason why we won a championship, and you don't want to
Yeah.
do that to players that got you a banner. Um, but like I said, I think that for the most part, he's done an okay job with talking to former players and having them be more involved into, like, whether it's practices or even events.
Yeah, I don't
But
know. Oh, go on.
I was gonna say, we've almost been on for 2 hours, so it feels like every week's a 2 hour podcast.
Dude, I mean, it's fun, man. I mean, I apologize if anybody heard my son crying in the background too.
No, we couldn't hear it. We
Oh,
heard
okay.
that fart though.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do that every podcast.
Well, why don't you tell the people where they can find the podcast, where they can follow you on Twitter, because we gotta get your Twitter followers up. Try to
Dude, I'm at 912 though. It's pretty awesome. Not gonna lie.
We gotta get you to 1,000. Gotta get
um,
you there.
all right, guys. Thank you guys for listening to the Pistons Talk podcast. Do us a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. After you subscribe, leave a review, drop a rating, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan. But also follow me on Twitter at Lance Caparosi.
To see you guys on Tuesday, I will be live streaming my reaction for that shit. So if we get fifth, you're gonna see me freaking out.
I'll be watching.
Peace, guys.